Hello, this is SK Williams, and this is a video that discusses the changes in the modern world, which I want to do on my other channel once I create it, but I've run into problems because you can't just create a Gaggle account with an email address now and typing in a password. You now either have to scan a QR code or else you have to have a key, which I don't feel comfortable scanning QR codes, so I'm going to try and create a key. So until then, I won't have a new channel, but I'm working on it. But that is one of the changes. I've noticed that Gaggle quite often shows trends in this direction. A lot of sites still just do the old password system where you type in an email address and a password and you get in. But Gaggle is moving on to tighter internet security. And while I can appreciate the sentiment, it does seem like it would also be a way for them to track you more thoroughly, which I'm not comfortable with. But that's the way it's going these days, and it is rather irritating. This channel, which of course was made before those new additions to security were made, it doesn't have that problem, but it does have the problem of continuing not allowance word choice, which is why I have to talk funny on this channel sometimes, because I'm trying to evade the ire of Al Gore and his rhythm. So we live in a very bizarre time. A time when the things that we knew and loved have been destroyed or dismantled, and when culture is moving on. We no longer revere Hollywood as the center of our storytelling, and there hasn't really been a replacement for that yet. There might be in the future. I'm not saying there won't be, but there might not. With the advent of the so-called artificial intelligence, we may see the democratization of entertainment, where what would once take a studio to make can now be done by a single person and a computer program. For that matter, computer programs are becoming much more sophisticated and are now capable of writing scripts, so we may have films that are entirely created by computer programs with no humans involved other than for the source material that was used in their training data, and perhaps a human prompt at the beginning. But even that human prompt at the beginning may not actually be necessary in the future. It may be able to generate its own prompts. I'm not really looking forward to that, though, because a lot of entertainment done by humans was already called soulless, and this definitely would be, because intelligence synthetica can't actually do anything that constitutes creative thought. And while what I'm about to say can be countered, I don't really think it's the same thing. Because the way current intelligence synthetica works, all it does is take a look at its training data and its instructions, and then remix existing properties. It does not genuinely create anything new. And now, some would say that that's true of all writers. They all take influence from things in their own past experiences, either their own personal experiences in life, things others told them, things that they have learned about history or philosophy, and, of course, other stories that they have watched. And they are remixed and rematched, and it's not really any different than what the intelligence synthetica does. I beg to differ, though, because even though there is truth to that when we see a new film or a new television series, or in this case a web series, or when we read a new novel, quite often it does have elements of other things in it that have been remixed and re-added. But there's this ineffable quality when humans do it, where there's a deeper understanding of the nuances of character and thought and living in a world that goes into constructing the fictional world that I don't think intelligent synthetica can ever quite attain. It is a quality that is difficult to describe, but I don't think that anyone can really argue successfully that it doesn't exist. However, I don't really have a problem with intelligent synthetica being used to make the visuals of a film, or even to help a writer straighten some things out, like formatting. I genuinely think that there is benefit to that. I don't know what it means, though, to the future. Because the technology we were told and promised would bring us all together is actually serving to divide us. While it is true that through the advent of the internet and social media, we are able to communicate with people around the world much more easily than ever before in human history. And a lot of information can be attained rapidly. We don't see a society becoming more enlightened and intelligent. We see the reverse. We see them becoming less intelligent and more lazy, because simply making information available to people does not mean that they will avail themselves to it. And quite often they don't. They simply listen to a select few, creating echo chambers. And of course, social media conditions us to look on screens at a curated persona that other people are presenting. Granted, not everyone curates their persona. Some people are very honest about it. I used to be honest about mine until I got problems, and now I have to speak in an odd way and slightly exaggerate here or there. But that's more of a problem because of censor on the ship that does not exist on Ramble or on the Shoot a Bit, which I haven't made videos for either of those platforms in a while, because you have to make videos for the lowest common denominator if you're only going to make 1 or 2 or 3 or so, and you intend on posting them all. And the holiday season is rather hectic, and I simply don't have time to make videos for all 3 platforms. Nevertheless, the point still stands. People are not using the internet as this great mythical version of the Library of Alexandria, where it holds all of human knowledge and wisdom, and we go to it to learn. They go to it so that they can find other people like them and reaffirm themselves in a chosen identity, or to amuse themselves to death by flipping through videos. And I don't condemn doing things purely for amusement on occasion, but I do think that we have an imbalance of the humors of society, if you can go with the historical metaphor based upon ancient medical knowledge, that I know, by the way, is outdated before some uppity militant atheist shows up to prove science whilst ignoring the real point. The point being that it seems our humors are out of balance, and we amuse and entertain ourselves to a much higher degree than we should. And we do so on content that is declining in value rather than increasing in value. This, I feel, is a grave problem, because while I'm not saying someone has to have a large, expensive video for it to be good, mine are not large and expensive, content does matter, and we shouldn't just consume a diet of junk food. If you think about the information that you're subjecting yourself to, be it by books or websites or blogs or television or radio or feature films or now internet videos, a lot of the videos are junk food. They don't even have the production values in the past that we used to have, and someone sitting in his room spouting off on something is not always the best way to spend one's time. This is especially true when those people try and speak on serious topics like philosophy, history, religion, and repeat bog-standard, ridiculous talking points. And the self-declared skeptic community is the worst offender in this regard, because they present themselves as experts in all of the intellectual fields, and especially religion, where they know everything and why it's false, but they keep making the same arguments that are fundamentally flawed, because they don't actually understand the arguments that people have made in the past. And they also don't listen to people in the present who hold such beliefs. I've had numerous atheists making assumptions about what I believe as a Christian that are not only what I don't believe, but aren't really what any Christian believes. But it is something that someone like Paul Logia would say Christians believe, which illustrates the point. And this is not something that happens just on one side. You will often see conservatives making mistakes about liberal content and liberals making mistakes about conservative content when it comes to politics. In our present world, conservatives actually understand liberals better than liberals understand conservatives. And when they speak of liberals, they are genuinely more accurate than liberals are when they speak of conservatives. But that is not to say that they never make mistakes or there's no misunderstandings. And again, that's more of a general rule, not an absolute one, as there are some people who are conservative who grossly misrepresent the liberal positions, just as there are some liberals who are more honest and more accurate about conservative positions. But in general, liberals are worse than conservatives at understanding their opposition. This is, of course, I don't think something that is inherent to being left-wing politically or being liberal, but I do think it is something that has developed within the modern world. And it is something that needs to be addressed and even discussed on why it's true and how it happened. This video, of course, is not the video to do that in, because I'm talking about a broader problem that affects everyone and not just one party in a political scenario. So I shan't be elaborating on it in this video. I will be in future ones and have in fact discussed it in previous videos. But it is interesting to note that people tend to isolate themselves more with the new technology that we have, because we ultimately form a sort of self-censorship that it keeps us in a little bubble where we curate what we see and what we don't see, and we are never challenged in our beliefs and assumptions. This has created a rather narcissistic society that seems to devour itself, really, and that cannot look outward and cannot assemble anything new. Almost everything we see produced is a commentary or a remix on an older idea. And we've been complaining about Hollywood doing this for years, but it seems to be a systematic fallacy of our entire culture, and not just something that is affecting Hollywood. Granted, it is affecting Hollywood. It is affecting our main historically important outlets for entertainment. We have Netflix creating its own She-Ra show, for example. It changed a great many things, but it still nevertheless was rooted in the original She-Ra concept and used all the She-Ra character names and certain ideas from it. And we see the same thing with Star Wars. It's not really a remix so much as an attempt at continuing it and adding more to it. But once Disney bought it, they dumped a lot into continuing Star Wars only in a way that allowed them to promote their own political agendas, which didn't work. And look at Star Trek, which was continued in the same vein as Star Wars was, where they simply added more content to the existing Star Trek. They didn't create a new one, but they fundamentally changed it so that they could promote their own ideology and their own perspective on things. But that's not much different than what we see with people who are outside of Hollywood, who are still remixing and re-adding certain things when they create newer stories. I'm thinking this era is coming to an end, though. We are beginning to see people come to the same conclusion that I'm talking about. And we are seeing people getting tired of censorship. But at the same time, there seems to be a coalescence of culture that seems to have coagulated, and even when rejecting the older things that we used to adore in entertainment, nevertheless themselves endlessly find themselves in a loop about them. This is changing, I think. I think some people are coming up with new things, like Dave Cullen wrote a book. I haven't read it, but he did write one. I believe he's written 2 or 3 in the same series now. And there are creators coming up with their own series. Freedom Tunes is another one, for example. But a lot of what we see is rehashing, and I think that's one of the greatest problems that we have in the modern world. I honestly think we need not to do away with everything old. I've never believed that. We need to tell old stories, but we also need new stories. And I think that trying to continue older stories when they're already over and they've already told what they needed to tell, is a problem that we constantly run into. Because there is a time and place for remakes or continuations of old things, but when everything is a remake or a continuation, then we have stagnation. And it's already risking stagnation of a specific story to try and add to it or remake it too many times. But there is a fundamental lack of creativity in our modern culture, just as there is a fundamental disconnect and isolation that is happening due to social media and isolation bubbles. And perhaps these things are related as people turn to what is familiar in the absence of new experiences and in their loneliness and isolation. I don't know if that is true or not, but I do know that what we're seeing in society cannot hold, and it really looks like we are going to have to bury certain assumptions of the past. Ironically, this will lead us to recover ancient wisdom, which is even older than our entertainment and political ideologies, but that, unlike our entertainment and political ideologies, are actually timeless. Things like Christianity or the principles of the world's religious traditions endure precisely because they are universally applicable, timeless, ancient wisdom. They endure in a way that even things that were originally based on their principles, like Star Wars, don't, because Star Wars is still a modern contextualization of that. And besides, you really can't ruin older properties. Even older public domain works that are produced by modern Hollywood can't really ruin the older thing, because there's this mindset that accepts that because they belong to everyone, you don't have to accept the new version of it. When something gets to be that old, people tend to think of the real version as being the old version and everything else as derivative. This is why you could have 1,000 different versions of Sherlock Holmes or Peter Pan or Brothers Grimm's fairy tales. And they don't really damage the original in the same way. And normally when people do them, they are remakes or retreads and not continuations, although one could, in theory, do a continuation, and I'm sure certain people have, but no one sees those as the real thing, and they don't detract from the real thing like Disney Star Wars did to Star Wars, because in our minds, even if we say Disney Star Wars isn't real Star Wars, we tend to treat it as real Star Wars. It's like saying it's not real Star Wars is more of a coping mechanism, but it is real Star Wars for some reason. And even in the world's religious traditions, we don't get tired of hearing their stories precisely because they preserve timeless truths. So you could have 1,000 different versions, and even if the majority of those versions are bad, the original remains good. Of course, militant atheists would say they don't, especially with Christianity, but they're engaging in motivated reasoning by refusing to accept that there could be good in something like Christianity. In fact, it's really just refusing to see good in Christianity. They're militant atheists are really just anti-Christian. They're not really anti-religion. But in terms of how we engage with it publicly, we can have something like The Chosen that some people loved and other people absolutely hated, but it will not detract from the actual story of Christ in the Bible, which will always be the true version of that story. And yes, atheists, there are 4 Gospels that all contradict each other. They don't really, but anytime you point out how the atheist is wrong, they'll say you're using mental gymnastics and accuse you of cognitive biases and cognitive dissonance. It gets old after a while, but the point being that the 4 Gospels are considered the original source for our knowledge of the story of Christ. In a way, something like The Chosen isn't, or even Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ, which was much better received, with less controversy. Oh, it was controversial in its time, but for different reasons. And therein lies the point. We are moving back to our traditional roots as a culture and back to our traditional beliefs and abandoning the entertainment industry that we so loved, as if God wished to smash our idols to bring us back to himself. which I think is very interesting to discuss, and which I will in the new channel when I'm more free to do so. But I haven't much else to say now, so I shall take my leave of you. Thank you, God bless, and goodbye.